creepy. Choosing to recover from being a people pleaser is always worth it. I'm just going to say that straight off the bat because it is. There are so many things I'm so grateful for, so many things that I'm so glad that I no longer have to put up with. You know, there's so many things that I don't have to like give my emotional energy to anymore. It is literally the most liberating thing I've ever chosen to do. So today's video is going to be the post-recovery or part of the recovery of being a people pleaser, and the kind of fallout of that nobody, I feel, is talking about. Nobody seems to talk about. Maybe it's just me. Everybody's people pleaser journey is different. I'm not saying that these things are even going to happen to you, but just to be aware of them, just to be aware that like the people pleaser journey is multifaceted. And someone just shout. The first thing I noticed so much was the rage, was the anger, was all this built up like emotion that I had to suppress all this time. The amount of times I remember telling myself, don't be angry, don't be mad, don't experience or express the negativity that you're feeling inside, whatever that might be. This can come from what society tells you. It can be from your caregivers. Most people pleasers aren't explicitly told, don't be angry, don't be this, it's bad to be angry, but just the general messaging that we're told, wherever that might come from in our upbringing, that to experience these negative emotions is something to suppress, something to swallow, is really, really bad. I think women experience this a lot more than men. I think there is a lot of room and a lot of space for men to be angry. But as soon as women are angry, they are labelled all sorts of like negative things. And it kind of conditions that woman to just shut the fuck up, basically, even though, you know, it's so important for them to take up space. It's encouraging them to have this belief that their voice doesn't matter and that their emotions don't matter. Society tells us that women's most important attribute, the most important thing about women is their appearance, which is why, you know, a lot of women believe that that's the most important thing about them, literally no fault of their own. But combined with then being told that they can't be angry is so dangerous, because it's all an expressed negative emotion, because it's like, I don't want to come across as unattractive to anybody, but predominantly through the male gaze. Like, we don't want to be unattractive by being angry, experiencing negative emotions, rude, assert, whatever. We kind of squash our emotions and squash our anger through fear of like looking unattractive in society's eyes. When I got to an age where I started to find, you know, boys attractive, that was very much a time when I was like, nope, shut the fuck up, Hattie, like, don't be angry, don't express anger, don't call things out, don't, you know, I remember literally not even men, boys at school, saying really unkind things to me, really rude things to me, trying to like, misogynistic things, you know, trying to put me down. I'd just be there, just taking it. I look at that person and I just feel sad that that's the messaging that they were taught, and that's what they felt like they had to respond like when faced with disrespect. So the rage that has been building up all that time, all that energy, all that anger, all that negative emotion that you feel like when you're in that recovery place, you're able to actually express and you're able to actually feel without feeling guilty about what other people think, having that sort of male gaze like on you, it kind of all comes rushing out. It's really overwhelming. I've been in this stage, I think, for like a good couple years. Like, I find myself doing things that are just rude. I have a very short fuse now. Honestly, it's to the point where things like, for example, and I can't even hold it back, you know, I don't even think before I act, and it's such an unfamiliar feeling to me. I'm so used to like policing my own behaviour that now coming out of this, it's almost like a bit out of control, like I'm not able to control it in the way that I once did. But obviously that's good. It means that like, you know, I should relinquish control, but to some extent, obviously, you know, you still need to have like control and to make sure that other people aren't being hurt. But even to the point where like, you know, I'll be walking across the road on a pedestrian crossing and the driver of a car, I kind of like probably overshot it a bit and walked across the road when they were a bit too close, and they beeped me, and I literally turned around, was like, and I didn't think it through, but it was like this low-key liberating but yet exciting yet scary experience, because I had no idea what the consequences were in that situation. I could have just stuck my middle fingers up to like a very dangerous individual and I would be fucked. It was like a combination of like negative feeling that rose up for him beeping me and like getting annoyed with me, that I then sort of reacted in this like defensive way. But it was almost this exciting feeling because I was like, shit, I've just pushed a boundary, I've just done something rude, and afterwards there was like no consequences for it. And that's kind of what you are learning in your people pleaser recovery. You kind of end up pushing boundaries. Certainly, I'm very conscious of doing that with people, but just in general, like pushing societal boundaries, I guess. I get and seeing what the reaction is and realising that there's actually no consequences for you doing anything. It's kind of like those kids at school. I would always think like, bloody hell, how do you like speak to the teacher like that? Or how do you like, are you not scared about, you know, the consequences of your behaviour at school? Like, you're not scared about getting humiliated in front of everybody or told off. The standards that people pleasers have for themselves in terms of their anger, or showing their anger, their negative emotions, is so like high compared to the average person. So when that people pleaser then starts to recover, in their head, they think that it's rude, it's angry, it's over the top, it's like obtuse for the situation. But actually, because their standards are so high, it's not. It's just kind of like a normal reaction, or what normal people would react like. Your standards are becoming more aligned with really what they should be, perhaps like a more healthy place. You should be able to express your negative emotions. I don't even know if pushing the boundaries is even the right word. It's kind of like just pushing past your own limiting beliefs and own worries about how someone might react, because that's what people pleasing is. It's like you're scared of the reaction somebody might have if you do something, or if you choose to put your feelings above others. So when you start to move the priority of your feelings up, it can feel like pushing boundaries, but it's not. It's just what normal people do. You know, it's so against like what you've been told that you're having to do it very gradually in order to like ascertain that it's safe every single time. Just know that feeling that rage, feeling that pent-up anger that you've felt for so long, and for all the other times when you haven't felt like you can express it and you suppressed it, it does come out. It comes out somewhere, and it comes out probably a little bit too much initially, and then it starts to, I hope, eventually like level out, and you kind of have a healthier relationship with it. Just know that it's a normal part of the process. Another thing I definitely have recognized during this recovery process is that I am typically like more cynical of people than I once was. I think when I was a people pleaser, I was like, yeah, everybody's lovely, like I'm gonna see the best in people. I hear a lot of people say like, you know, most people are good, most people have good intentions. I just right now don't feel that way. I don't feel like there's many good people. I think about people that I know, I think about experiences I've had with people. From my experience, like 80-90% of people that I've interacted with have like done things that are hurtful, have done like morally like not okay things. To think that most people are good supports, validates our belief that other people's feelings are more important. But when you kind of start to recover and you start to realize that your feelings are also equally important, you start this sort of balance of whose feelings are more important starts to shift. And so does that feeling of like, oh, well, if my feelings are equally as important or whatever, more important in the situation for me or whatever it is, you kind of start to realize like, shit, people aren't perfect. People kind of suck. And why was I making their feelings more important than mine in this situation? Because not everybody has good intentions. This sort of veil of people's feelings being more important and people being like lovely, and that, you know, I'm the problem and that I'm the one that needs to change, that I'm the one that needs to be more accommodating and so on. That veil lifts. And when that veil lifts, you become more cynical because you're like, or at least you start to realise that all those times when you put other people's feelings before yours, it was unnecessary, it didn't matter, and actually they were being potentially unreasonable in that situation, deflecting, projecting, whatever it might be. And it's this sort of horrible realization that you've been putting other people's feelings in front of yours for no reason, and on top of that, you're realizing that other people's opinions and feelings aren't more valid than yours, and they're not always like right, as it were, or they're not always like coming from a good place. And when you sort of start to remove that pedestal from other people, you begin to realize the reality of what most humans are like, And it's not this like sunshine roses, they do everything right, they do everything correctly. And you start to realise like, fuck. And I think that's where the cynicism comes in. Hoping to come out of this phase and think that most people are good, but I just feel like at the moment, not that many people do have good intentions. Not that many people do come from like a more healed place and a more self-aware place. I don't think many people are self-aware. And the problem with a lack of self-awareness is you impact people negatively. You're not considerate of other people and their feelings and their existence. You kind of do go the other way, or at least I did, and I still do. I do think that most people are living on autopilot and they don't like clock their own toxic traits. I want to get back to that place of thinking that most people are good, and I think I will eventually, but for now, I don't know. I think I have developed a bit of cynicism, and it's because of that sort of unlearning recovery process of being a people pleaser. The one thing that is probably the most tough mentally to go through during this people pleaser recovery is starting from scratch again with trusting yourself. When you're a people pleaser, you put all of your faith in external validation, in external points of view. You have low self-esteem, you don't really value yourself very highly. We just have learned to not trust our own instincts, not trust ourselves, because when we've been like punished for it, we've been made to feel like we're the problem. It is a very dangerous place to be in, and when you choose to go through that recovery process, you are confronted with the same things that you were confronted with before, which is that people like gaslight you, people make you second guess yourself, you really don't trust your gut whatsoever, and you have to physically force yourself to choose yourself in those situations, because it's so against your nature or your conditioning to trust yourself. You have to actively push back. That's really hard to do. I've this year chosen to trust myself with a few like former friendships, and I've decided to like remove those friendships from my life, and it took a huge amount for me of self-trust to decide to remove myself from those friendships, because when I did, and when I tried to explain to them why I wanted to remove myself from the friendship, it was met, and this is how most people meet things that don't align with what they think of themselves. It was met with defensiveness, it was met with projection, and in that moment, I remember it very distinctly with one particular friendship. I was like, this is an opportunity for me to choose myself, even though I'm like giving in to like believing what they're saying about me, or believing what they're saying in terms of like, oh well, you should have done this, you should have done that, I don't think this is fair, like basically get defensive. I had to actively choose myself and actively choose my own experience, even when in fact this particular person actually tried to say to me that my experience was an anomaly and it was not what other people had experienced with them, and essentially tried to single me out and tried to make me feel like my feelings weren't valid and that like my experience wasn't valid. It's basically like them trying to protect their own ego from believing that someone had experienced what they had experienced from them. So essentially it was a tactic to try and make me feel singled out and make me feel like, well, you know, no one else feels like this, so you must be the problem. And I had to actively be like, no, I trust myself, I know my experience, I know how it's made me feel. When you stand up for yourself, when you start to like call out bad behaviour, or when you start to remove yourself from friendships or relationships or whatever that don't work for you anymore, people will resist it, and it's an opportunity for you to be like, I've got to trust myself here, I know what's up. And it is so hard for a people pleaser to do that. It is really hard, because through that process, even though you know your instincts right, even though you know that your experience is true and it's not something you want to carry on experiencing, part of you still kind of does believe what they're saying because you don't trust yourself. So the only way you're going to build up that trust again with yourself is to continue to confront these situations by choosing yourself, and sit in the discomfort of like, I'm not sure, am I doing the right thing, and just still choose yourself and still remove yourself from the situation. And over time, that trust builds to the point where it doesn't matter what people say, it doesn't matter whether someone tries to gaslight you, tries to second guess your experience, whatever, you'll be like, bitch, I know what's up, I know my true feeling, I know my experience. You can probably assign those kind of reactions to manipulation anyway, of trying to keep you in their hold. But the only way you're going to be able to build up trust with yourself is to practice trusting yourself, even when you don't fully trust yourself, if that makes sense. And people will test you, people will try to get you to not trust yourself and try to question yourself. And even in sitting in that little voice in your head where you're like, oh, you know, are they right? Am I being unkind here? Am I being unfair? You've got to still, despite that voice, choose yourself. It is genuinely peaceful for me to not have those people in my life anymore. And waking up every day to literal bliss, knowing that I don't have to interact with those people anymore, is like the reward for choosing myself and trusting my gut and trusting my intuition and honouring that despite the questioning not only of them but myself. But if you see it as a test, it kind of makes it a lot less personal. It makes it a lot less overwhelming because you're like, it's just a test. It's not even personal. It's not even about me. It's just a test. The grief that you can feel for those missed opportunities as a result of your former people pleaserness is something that you will grapple with. Because the thing is, when you are a people pleaser, as I said before, you have low self-esteem, you don't trust yourself, you don't think highly of yourself, so you don't tend to take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to you because you don't genuinely believe that you are deserving of them or that you will get there. So you're like, I'm just going to take myself out of the game anyway. The missed opportunities that come from being a people pleaser are hard to get over because you're like, oh my God, I know who I am now. I know like that I would just snap up that opportunity now. As a spiritual person, generally speaking, I think, you know what, being a people pleaser was part of my journey. It was something that I need to go through to get to where I am today, and I'm so grateful for it. But it doesn't stop that grief of what you could have had creeping in. One thing that I would have pursued more would have been like singing and acting. I was in fact deterred, encouraged not to do that. And as a result of my low self-esteem and sort of like wanting to please adults in my life, I didn't pursue it because not only did I have like no means to do it, but also I wanted to make sure that they were happy with what I did. So if I was the person I was now, then I would have probably taken up way more opportunities when it came to singing, acting, and not done other things. So I probably wouldn't have done A-levels. I probably wouldn't have gone to university. I would have just like moved to London or something and pursued acting and singing. I did A-levels, did my degree, and I got to 23 and I was like, why did I just do this degree? You know, there's certain opportunities that I got that were like, great. I had 4 businesses and that's because I had the space to do it while I was at university and so on. You know, what if I hadn't given into those people-pleaser tendencies, like other people to give me the go-ahead for stuff? I would have done things that I genuinely do now. You know, I please myself all the time. That sounds really ominous. I do things that make me happy more than I kind of concern myself with how it's pleasing other people. A side note, recovering people pleasers will be called selfish by those people that they would be also keen to please, but you're not. You're just literally doing things for yourself. I don't know, maybe I would have done A-levels and I am grateful for it. Like, I wouldn't change a thing now, but there are things that I do think, would my life have been different had I chosen to just be like, I'm going to do what I want to do? Yeah, probably. I think I would be a completely different person. I think I'd be a lot more confident. I think I'd be a lot more sure of myself. And yes, I am those things more so now. But like, I'm 25. I wish I'd had like a longer period of time to experience this. It's a nice, peaceful feeling. That sort of grief for the potential of what things could have been like is hard, and it's part of that recovery process. Linked to this then is the, I guess, like resentment you feel to your former self for putting up with things that you would now never put up with. The amount of times I would like go back to people that abused me or were unkind to me because I was like, I need their validation to kind of like feel important or feel like I matter, or to validate the fact that I'm putting their feelings above mine, was ridiculous. Like, honestly, if I got spoken to or treated in the way that I did by some people at school, that would be the last they'd ever get to interact with me. That would be the last time they ever got to interact with me now. I would be like, fuck off. Do not speak to me like that. Like, I would just, it's not even like I would just simply move away from them. I would say something, and I would never dare say something back in the day through fear of the reaction of standing up for myself. As a child, you know, you're a child. You can't help experiencing the conditioning that you experience. Yes, when you're older, you do have responsibility to unlearn those things, to heal, to have more self-awareness. But I think as a child, your brain is like so malleable and so easy to manipulate and like contort into a shape that somebody wants. It's so unhelpful to beat up your former self for those things, but you do. Like, I am, one of the big things I'm working through at the moment is to try and forgive my former self for the treatment that I put up with from people. The sort of solution to that, really, I suppose, is to have compassion for that person. They were doing the best they could with the tools that they had at the time, and you know better now, and you can almost like comfort that person now. Sometimes I speak to like my inner child, sometimes I journal to my sort of former self. What I've realised and what I've heard a lot is that when you start to forgive that person, the healing process gets easier, because you're no longer sort of het up on resenting your former self and instead approach them with forgiveness. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I really would like to hear your thoughts, your opinions, your perspective on the people pleaser recovery journey, what you've experienced. Have a great week or weekend, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.